Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with two of my friends from Egress. We have Sudeep Venkatesh, who is the Chief Product Officer for the company, and also Mark Bauer, who's the Chief Revenue Officer for the company here in the US. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Ed.
Welcome to New York City on a hot day.
Yeah, it's certainly warm enough.
It is. Now, you guys have worked together a long time, haven't you?
We have.
About 20 years this December. So the joke is that we work for 5 companies together. I have found Mark 3 jobs. He's found me 2. So he owes me 1. But the way in which Egress is going, I don't want to call on that debt for a very long time.
Yeah, and we've worked together in security for that amount of time and are still friends. So yeah, pretty good history there.
Well, that's pretty good. So you've had a good perspective on both the progression of the security industry and also the companies you've worked for. That's fantastic. It gives you a good perspective.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. So some of the first technologies that we worked together on were digital certificates and public key infrastructures. But obviously the use cases have changed so much over the past 20 years. Been very interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah, there's no question. PKI, the promise of PKI, I think was met technically, but it's not clear maybe from a business perspective that it always sort of met those expectations we all had for a big public key infrastructure.
Yeah, that's so true. Back in the day, everybody expected everyone to have a digital certificate, and that was the vision and promise, and it never happened. It found its niches, and it's certainly prevalent today, but not to the extent that people expected it. Yeah. But certainly since then, technologies have evolved, and things are very different today than they were 20 years ago when we kicked off.
Now let's go back and start with that. Back in those days, tell me if I've got this right, and Sudeep, maybe you can comment. I think people thought more about protecting an enterprise land than, say, the data, or even worrying about the user. Am I reading that right? It was more about the ring of the perimeter protected company than what's going on inside. Is that right?
That's very correct. And also with PKIs, I think the use cases were very different, where you had technical people like you and I importing digital certificates into our old browsers or old Outlook environments and trying to communicate with those. Certainly the ad hoc use cases that we see currently, when it's moms, dads, nurses, doctors wanting to share data securely, they certainly weren't there 20 years ago. So that's pretty new in our industry right now.
Mm-hmm. What caused people to start thinking about data security? And was it sort of the breakdown of the perimeter, or was it new applications or mobility or all of the above? How did we make that shift toward a more data-centric solution?
Sure. So there is nothing called a perimeter right now. So if you look at a typical organization, their databases might be hosted in Microsoft Azure. Many of their web applications might be hosted in Amazon Web Services. Many organizations don't even have storage servers or networks anymore. So the concept of a perimeter is long gone with the invention of the cloud and all the investments that happen in it. But the only things left for an organization are obviously the data and the user. So when we look at security software and when we look at assets that we need to protect, that comes down again to data and the user.
Yeah. Mark, you obviously participated through this whole couple of decades. As we move kind of from that early view of security, which there's land view, to a more data-centric, and obviously the work you do at Egress, you see that? Is it a better business? I mean, like we would all say, I think we were lamenting over coffee earlier that PKI never really met its full business potential. Is that changing now? Are companies, certainly you guys, do you see business as being more vibrant?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have stayed in the security industry this long if it wasn't successful for me as an individual. But the industry has changed very dramatically over the last 20 odd years. We've seen that, as Sudeep's mentioned, the shift now to cloud services. But fundamentally, the problems over the years have been the kind of breakdown of the perimeter, the fact that we've had massive breaches over the years. And the way we look at things, coming back to the data and the users, we see the world through the lens of data being split into 2 areas, 2 categories. You have what we think of as the structured data, so data in databases, maybe fields, credit cards, social security numbers, and then the unstructured data. And in fact, the last 5-6 years before we joined Egress, we were focused on protecting the structured data with some innovations and technologies like format preserving encryption, some advanced tokenization techniques, which I think are prevalent in industry now. But the unsolved problem is really about when humans have to interact with data. So this is more that unstructured data, things like documents, files, media. It could be a video interview like this that we want to share securely before it's released to the public. And so you have to think about different ways of solving the protection of information, making it easily accessible while secure, but also that problem of the user. What if they do something wrong? And that's been a really difficult problem to solve. We were always getting asked about, how do you solve the unstructured data problem, and tell me how you solve for people making mistakes and errors in collaborating at scale.
Is that Egress in a nutshell, this idea that unstructured data really needs additional security attention?
Yes, I would definitely think so. And also, as Mark was saying, unstructured data is typically created by users, and users are unpredictable. Users make mistakes, accidents do happen, as we say, and in some unfortunate situations, users are also malicious, where they try to exfiltrate data out of organizations. So what we like to do at Egress, or what we do at Egress, is we build a privacy and risk management platform around the user, so we can introduce some predictability into how a user handles unstructured data. So this could mean things like helping an organization discover and classify data that users encounter. It could mean things like providing privacy tools such as encryption, so users can, in a very, very simple way and securely, exchange data amongst each other. It could also mean preventing things like the accidental send. It could mean alerting the administrators to any anomalies that might happen in user behavior. And then, of course, making sure that all of this is reported on and audited on in a very granular fashion.
Right.
So that's exactly what we mean by our privacy and risk management platform that helps protect unstructured data.
Yeah, and to your point as well, I think another big shift in the last 20 years is we saw very weak privacy regulations 20 years ago that have now become incredibly strong through government enforcement. So the most recent being GDPR in Europe. That's having an effect here in the US with organizations that handle data interchange with Europe.
We've noticed.
But you have pretty strong regulations like New York DFS here for the financial services. And so being able to securely share and manage things, manage the mistakes, but also get visibility from a compliance perspective, those are top matters for organizations today.
To make all this work, I would imagine you have to interoperate with typical office tools, productivity tools, cloud systems. Is there a big integration obligation to make these things work and make them easy for users?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, any security software that touches users will not be used unless it's easy to use. And we've seen that for the past couple of decades. That's one of the reasons why PKI has failed, because we didn't create applications that were easy to use and transparent to users. So obviously a huge focus is usability. Many users are moving to cloud applications such as G Suite. Many organizations are moving to Microsoft Office 365. So we have to make sure that our tools are completely compatible with those platforms and provide users with very easy to use options, especially on the encryption side, which is notorious for being difficult and
being difficult.
Correct.
And why don't you share a couple of use cases? I know there's some interesting ones that you guys that highlight and bring out the value of the product.
Absolutely. And I think amongst all the things that I talk about at Egress, the most important part to me is how we empower users through security. So one example is the Welsh police in the UK has implemented a system using Egress software where now any citizen who is driving along can report any misadventures with other drivers that they see. So these could be things like other drivers speeding, these could be things like broken taillights, not stopping at stop signs. So this has created such a great culture of safe driving in Wales, we believe, that it's saved 150 lives a year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So fatalities on the road in Wales has gone down from about 600 to about 450 a year. Obviously 450 too much, but it's interesting to see how this has empowered citizens to make the road safer for themselves.
Yeah, and that example is a great one because that's a classic case of the unstructured data, right? It's things like dash cam footage or CCTV footage that citizens can effectively very easily send in to law enforcement, which previously they took something like 15 hours per case to actually collect and collate that data, which was problematic because it took people off the streets from general police work and was just administrative burden. And so being able to save on that as well as save lives it's a really heartwarming case, because it goes beyond the usual compliance story and saving money on PCI or HIPAA or something like that to actual lives saved.
Very, very touching story. The other organization that we work with is a non-profit that helps victims who are in abused relationships escape those relationships. It provides help to people who are in bad relationships get out of there. So this organization uses our email encryption software and our email protection software so they can communicate securely with these users as they seek help. Not only is this a really good use case to get people to safety, but also makes us very aware of the usability aspects of our software. Because our software being made more usable such that a user can seek help even a couple of seconds before a dangerous incident, that could actually save this person's life. So that gives you a totally different perspective on security software, and also on usability.
We spend a lot of time on usability integration. Let's talk threat for a minute, because we've all been at this a long time. It's been constant that you have to do good user interfaces, make things easy to deploy and maintain and use, but the threat has changed a lot. Is it harder to develop security solutions now than it was maybe with a little less intense threat? I don't think the nation state actor was as severe maybe 20 years ago. You had hackers, but it seems way worse now. It seems scarier now for businesses. Am I reading that right?
You're reading that right, but we now, with the advancements in technology such as the massive processing that we can do of data in the cloud, things like graph databases that help us look at relationships between users and interactions, I think this advancement in technology also gives us the ability now to pick anomalies in user behavior and in how networks essentially behave. So, older DLP systems, for example, were very signature based. So Mark could send credit card numbers outside an organization, or he could not. Mark could email after midnight to a Gmail account, or he could not. So they were very rigid and typically took a lot of management, because now if Mark's role changed, you have to go and change all those rules and propagate them. But some of the advancements, especially in machine learning, help us detect anomalies in Mark's behavior. So for example, Mark typically might be sending an attachment size of an average of 5 meg per day, but if that goes up or down by 50%, that might be something that a company might want to investigate. If you, Ed, are typically only emailing between 9 in the morning and 5 in the evening, then if you're suddenly sending a lot of emails at midnight to a Gmail account, then that could be an insider threat. So while the dimension and while the intensity of the threats has changed, simultaneously the tools that we have as software vendors, as security software vendors, have become more and more advanced as well. Because of these advancements in things like graph databases, machine learning, parallel processing, etc.
And that is entree to artificial intelligence, right? It really builds you, you sort of get to the cusp of automation and autonomy as part of the kinds of things that you guys are doing. It's kind of an exciting future for all of us. Mark, you've been at this a while. I want to ask you about the future. Are you optimistic about how cybersecurity and IT and cloud and all the things we've all worked in, are we moving toward a brighter IT security future? Or
that's a good question. Certainly, having seen the changes in the landscape, I'm personally really excited about the nature of the artificial intelligence capabilities, because I do think that has come of age. Again, like many security technologies that had promise 20 years ago, like PKI and others, so did artificial intelligence. It was always going to be that frontier. But now, with the compute power you have at hand, and being able to focus on really specific niche use cases like the ones that Sudeep's mentioned, which are really just the first examples of where Egress is taking this technology, gives a completely fresh point of view. You're able to provide tools to users that not only enable them to easily share and secure and get the audit over data, but provide those more guide rail principles to provide more or less an autopilot for people doing everyday mundane things that have an immense amount of risk in them, and to do that easily. And when you start to put tools like that in front of a person, it becomes compelling. They get better at understanding their relationship to the data, and the tools can guide them to do things the right way instead of potentially falling foul of a mistake, which, politely put, could be career limiting for some individuals as well with the nature of the data they're handling. So yes, I'm very optimistic, and I see that with all of the innovations of the past companies we've worked with. This is absolutely at the forefront of the new security for the next decade at least.
Wow, I want that now. That sounds like technology I could sure use yesterday, right? So what do you think when you look into the crystal ball?
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem of putting rules to block certain things, I mean, that's been taken care of for decades, where you could put a rule to prevent a user from doing something, or things like access control lists, etc., no matter how sophisticated they are. Some of these new technologies, however, go a step beyond that, where you can pick anomalies in user behavior. So you can look at what past user behavior patterns were and then judge whether users or applications have strayed from those or not. And in the Egress ecosystem, in the Egress product set, that is what excites me the most.
That's fantastic. Well, I know you guys travel a lot. I hope you're enjoying your time here in New York City.
Yeah, it's fantastic so far.
And it's great to see what you're doing at Egress. I think wonderful technology, and there's some really obvious and compelling use cases. It's exciting. I love hearing about how things are coming, and thanks for stopping by. It was wonderful chatting with you both.
Thank you so much for having us, Ed.
Oh, you bet. And we'll see you next time.